There's a lot of things I really don't like about Stone Ocean. Though, if I had to choose one thing that I thought was the best thing to come out of it, I would say the story of Foo Fighters is possibly one of my favorites, and definitely holds up the best compared to everything else in Part 6. Though, if there's one thing about Foo Fighters that does need a little bit of explaining, it's their power. Because what exactly is Foo Fighters? So for the first time on It Just Works, the Stan and the person actually have the same name, and are technically the same thing. So to understand both, we actually need to examine the meaning behind the name Foo Fighters. And this is going to get a little confusing. So the name Foo Fighters comes from the American rock band Foo Fighters, made by Dave Grohl. Now, Foo Fighters, the character, could either be based entirely on the band and their whole discography, or the band's first album, which is also called Foo Fighters. But I personally believe it's based on the band itself, but you could make a case for either. But I feel the case for the full band and its discography is much stronger. Speaking of the band, let's talk about that. The reason that Dave Grohl made his band the Foo Fighters is because he wanted to have a coping mechanism for his feelings towards the suicide of one of his best friends, Kurt Cobain, who is also one of his former bandmates. He also wanted an outlet for some of his creative ideas for future songs that he never got to do. Then over time, the band that Grohl used to overcome his own personal frustrations shifted and became something more. Dave Grohl found passion again through Foo Fighters, and it became part of him. Part of his overall identity. This is very similar to the character that is Foo Fighters, because not only was Foo Fighters created through the experimentation done by Pucci, as he needed a guardian for his stash of stand discs, such he tossed a disc into the ocean filled with intelligence and an ability, which, given that the guardian for the stand disc would be surrounded by water, this was actually a pretty smart move on his part, and the discs landed into a colony of plankton, and thus Foo Fighters was born. This birth through curiosity and experimentation is actually a pretty perfect metaphor for the creation of Foo Fighters the band, so it would see fit that it fits as the creation of Foo Fighters the character. Another strong connection between the band and the character is that only through death can something new be created. With Grohl, the creation of his band Foo Fighters was made as an outlet for his passion because of the death of his friend. And for Foo Fighters, they had to reshape the corpse of Atreyu, a fallen inmate, so they could have a vessel that allowed them to survive on land so they could learn and grow in a way that was originally impossible to them. And as time goes on, both Grohl and Foo Fighters become very connected to their new creations. Grohl commits his career to Foo Fighters, creating a wholly new band no longer in the shadow of Nirvana. And Foo Fighters gets her soul created in the image of Atreyu, but it's modified to match her specifically. And Foo Fighters herself even says that she becomes something wholly new and original. This is actually very important to the character of Foo Fighters, as her story is that about discovering her own identity. As they were once a single-cell organism with no consciousness or identity, after Pucci bestowed these features onto Foo Fighters, it chose to serve him out of loyalty, but also fear of losing these traits. But after meeting Jolene and living life outside the bubble that Pucci forced her into, Foo Fighters discovers what it's like to be human. She gains a true identity, and through that, a soul. This is why it's so important that not only does Foo Fighters rebel against Pucci, but in doing so, she takes a form that changes the one that Pucci gave to her. She creates her own self. Now, songs I feel that play into her character development a lot is Learn to Fly on the There's Nothing Left to Lose album, then you have February Star from the Colors and Shape album, and then you finally have the most important song that plays in the Foo Fighters, and that's I'll Stick Around from the Foo Fighters album. There's a lot more songs that could play into her, but I felt it was good to limit it to one per album. So the reason that Learn to Fly is so important to Foo Fighters is because the song itself is described by Grohl as the search for signs of life that will make you feel alive, which, if you pay attention to the lyrics, is pretty obvious. This is a message that is intertwined into the character of Foo Fighters, as their whole development as a character is them learning what it means to be human, or what it's like to be truly alive. I mean, her final words as she ascends into heaven is that she knows for sure that she was finally, truly alive. Then you have February Star, which is a song described by Grohl as just a song about hanging on by the tips of your fingers, hoping that you don't slip and fall, which fits kind of perfectly for every single Foo Fighters fight in part 6. She's always reduced to the similar situation where she's hanging in by a few cells or a few plankton, where she just overcomes the odds as she's able to get to one thing of water. She is metaphorically always hanging by her fingers in every single fight that she's in. Then lastly, you have the most important song to Foo Fighters' character, I'll Stick Around. This song is one of the first songs written by Grohl after the passing of Kurt Cobain, and Grohl describes it as a very negative song about feeling like you were violated or deprived. Though the target of the song wasn't revealed till a while later, it's pretty obvious who the lyrics were directed at. They were aimed at Courtney Love, the widow of Kurt Cobain, and after the passing of Kurt Cobain, tried her hardest to own Nirvana, suing surviving members and along with Universal Music Group to get the rights to the band. The lyrics, "I don't owe you anything," are filled with such anger and emotion that Grohl feared that the listeners might direct it at his late friend. He quickly denied these claims though, and in denying those claims, he also came out with who they were directed at. Now, the reason that this song is so important to Foo Fighters is that it summarizes Foo Fighters' feelings towards Pucci, her creator. And I think this makes me actually the first person to ever compare Courtney Love to Enrico Pucci, and I think that's a pretty fair comparison, but that's a topic for a different time. Anyways, the hate-packed words that Grohl put into his song are found in Foo Fighters' actions, as her rebelling from Pucci and breaking free of the prison that he put her in is her own personal way of telling him that she doesn't owe him anything. I recommend reading the lyrics and then rereading the fight between Pucci and Foo Fighters, and you might start to notice a few things, because even in death, Foo Fighters' legacies and actions will stick around. Now, design-wise, Foo Fighters isn't too amazing, as a lot of the design could be based on Grohl's description of how he made his first album, which he said had a lot of nonsensical placement holder words to just match for rhymes. Where they sounded good when they were played, they had no real meaning attached to them. And this could explain her hair and overalls, as they sure do look kinda good together in a weird symmetrical way, still come off as sort of a mess, which kind of fits Foo Fighters in a sense. Now, the stand, Araki wanted to be designed more like a microscopic organism, but he said he failed and kind of came out more resembling a lizard, so I guess like Foo Fighters' design is more of an overall accident, and it kind of fits. Now, moving on to the actual ability of Foo Fighters. Now, even though Foo Fighters is a stand, it's actually a little bit more complicated than that. What Pucci created that day was actually a new species. This species chooses to call itself Foo Fighters, and its stats as a stand are B in destructive power, A in speed, C in range, A in durability, C in precision, and B in developmental potential. Now, Foo Fighters' ability is where we start to get a little bit more complicated. So the type of stand that Foo Fighters is kind of strange, as it's the first real species stand. A stand that has knowledge mixed together with a single-celled organism that is called plankton and created a new life form. This new life form is both stand and stand user at the same time. The ability itself is unmentioned because it's just a disc that Pucci threw into the ocean, so they never actually gave it a name, they just called it the Foo Fighters disc. But I think that the disc itself is accelerated growth. This would allow the user to accelerate any natural biological function or material, such as healing or reproduction. This would allow Foo Fighters to create massive amounts of themselves in mere seconds, given that plankton can reproduce asexually. This also allows Foo Fighters to manipulate other people's biological functions, but she would have to be inside them to do so, which is actually shown in her patching up wounds by injecting herself into the people, but she also freely manipulates the vessel in which she can take any form that she pleases. She also seems to possess the ability to slightly manipulate water, as she is able to create a water pressure pistol with her finger, also being able to make basically a square mirror out of 1/3 of a cup of water. This could also be the power of the disc that Pucci tossed into the ocean, but I can also see it being based on Foo Fighters' natural connection to water, given that they are a species that needs water to survive. That is the one downside to Foo Fighters' ability. Even though it can mass produce itself and make itself basically unkillable, if Foo Fighters is drained of its water, then it has but mere seconds to find some more or it will dry up and die. And accelerated growth actually plays a lot into Foo Fighters, the band, or at least the idea of Foo Fighters, as the band itself helped accelerate the growth of David Grohl's career, moving him from the guy who played drums for Nirvana to the lead singer of his own band. And I mean, both Foo Fighters show that You can start as something very small and work your way up to being your own legend. Foo Fighters is actually one of my favorite characters in JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, even though she comes from part 6. It's kind of weird. Her short yet impactful life is one of the only reasons to actually read part 6, honestly. Now, if you enjoyed this video and would like to support more videos like it, I have a Patreon over at patreon.com/MeddieNotTheBadGuy. This was a It Just Works voted on by patrons over at that Patreon. So if you want to vote for the next It Just Works Patreon edition, you could head on over there, support the channel. You get to vote in the next poll for December's It Just Works. And if you want to live a life that is truly and 100% free, head on over to funimation.com/show/Shimonetta, boring world where the concept of dirty jokes doesn't exist, and buy yourself a copy. It'll arrive even before Christmas. It's like a free Christmas present. It's the end of November. You might as well buy your entire family Shimonetta copies. Come on, do it.